We're talking about what is a rabbi, because in order to figure out if a lady can be a rabbi, we have to first know what is a rabbi.
There is a rabbi, but she's not orthodox.
Right. So we're dealing from this from a traditional halachic standpoint, and we have to define our terms. So in part of defining our terms at the end of last week, we listed 10 things that definitions of a rabbi. Paulette added an 11th one, but you might have a 12th one, and so on and so forth. Let me read the first 10. The first one has smicha, meaning he has rabbinic ordination. Okay? Is a teacher. Is a leader of a community. 3. 4 is a spiritual guide. So we're talking about, first is ordained, second is a teacher, a leader of a community, and is a spiritual guide. 5, he takes care of the social needs of the community. Is a businessman and fundraiser. I failed at rabbi skills. Officiates at life cycle events, bar mitzvahs, weddings, burials, all kinds of. Some lead services, so Torah reading, leading the prayers on the high holidays, Shabbat, things like that. 9, does Jewish outreach.
Yes.
So, reaching out to maybe less affiliated Jews, or helping people discover their Jewish faith or their Jewish roots. Okay? Amazing how this is number 10 on the list. This is number 10. Is a Torah scholar and interprets Jewish law.
Oh, that should be first, actually. Yeah, that should be first.
But hang on, isn't that part of the beginning of having smicha?
Oh, so is it part of being ordained as a rabbi? We're going to discuss that too.
Well, it depends, because there's different type of ordination.
Yes,
so before I nitpick this list, before we
where did she get the list?
We made it up here at the end of the class.
Oh, we discussed it.
We wrote it.
Okay,
We made it up.
Paulette, your 11th one was showing compassion and understanding when a person comes to you for help, to be able to connect to them, to what they're going through. Not the person who's coming to you because they're going through a divorce doesn't necessarily want to know all about the laws of Gittin, of how to write a get. They want to know, this is, there's things that people go through, relationship advice, how do you build your life up afterward, such things. This is part of the package of compassion, understanding. Nobody wants to hear a discourse on the laws of divorce. That's not what they're coming to the rabbi for. 12, Ariella?
Politician.
A politician?
Yeah.
Explain.
I think the organization of rabbis, they're actually politicians.
How so? In a good way or a bad way?
Well, I guess in a lot of ways in existence in the communities that they are. So in New York, there's lobbyists behind them. There's more than what they portray behind the scene, what we see.
Okay, so rabbi is a politician. So you find that in America more than in Israel, or vice versa, or equally
I
so?
think in both. Quite similar.
Okay.
I think even in South Africa they have to be politicians because everybody's working behind the scenes. There's always.
I think can I maybe throw into politician two different sides of the politician coin? There's the politician, what you're talking about. Who do you represent? What do you back? What are the values you're pushing? At the end of the day, a rabbinic position has a certain weight in the Jewish community, and I know that in Baltimore, when there were elections, all kinds of politicians showed up in the yeshiva to shake the Rosh Yeshiva's hand. Why? He needs 1,000 votes, so this was an easy way to get it. There's that side of things. Who backs you? Which denomination are you representing?
Yeah.
What are your interests? Okay. There's another side of politician, which is when you are a singular leader of a community, you have a lot of things you have to deal with in the community that you cannot be opinionated about. I'll explain. 2 people are fighting. They're both long-standing members of the synagogue community. If they ask you to get involved, you can get involved. But at the end of the day, it would be very difficult for you to say, I'm going with these people and I'm throwing you guys out. The job of a rabbi sometimes is to be a politician, to show nice face to this person and to show a nice face to that person, especially when whatever they're going through doesn't affect the community itself. I'm not talking here about if they're a serial killer moved into the community, the rabbi can't have a stance on it. I'm not talking about such things. I'm talking about a situation where not always is the rabbi, somebody sometimes you have to be a politician towards the people in the community. Okay? Can I add that to your definition of politician? To be politically correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, I agree with you.
Yes.
Okay, so now we have 11, 12. Anyone else have an addition to the list? Mommy? You have to have a rebbitzin to be a rabbi?
You have to be a great organizer.
An organizer. So I think that goes into businessman, fundraiser, organizer. Meaning, okay? That would go to politician. You're right. To be the diplomatic side of a politician. Some people don't know how to do this. There are people. Okay, charisma. Would charisma go into? I guess being a teacher, you don't necessarily have to be charismatic to be a teacher, huh? But it used to be that it helps. Okay, to be charismatic. Let me then explain what I'm trying to get at. Is not qualities that a rabbi should have, but definitions of what is a rabbi. So someone who would be charismatic might not necessarily be a rabbi. Abba's not in the picture. But Imma's here. If you look at it the right way, that's Imma. There are many qualities I could throw at you. It has to be kind, has to be fair, has to be, as all kinds of things. But at the end of the day, those don't define what is a rabbi, but rather traits that, and we could maybe make a second list of traits that a rabbi should or could or must have. You'd lose a lot of rabbis if you made such a list.
Ultimately, teacher.
So ultimately, he's a teacher. Okay, so let's talk about. We'll talk about the first definition. Marley, we have chairs here. Oh, okay, something else. Has smicha, rabbinic ordination.
Yes.
Let's start with that because it's the first thing on my list. I think most people would agree.
Every rabbi has different smicha.
Does every rabbi have smicha?
Well, he should have smicha, otherwise he can't.
Smicha is the Hebrew word for ordination. I'll explain. In the times, biblical times, and Talmudic times, up until the Roman occupation of the land of Israel, smicha literally means to lean on. Kind of like before we would slaughter a goat in the temple, one of the mitzvot is to... Hi. One of the mitzvot is to lean on the goat's head, to lean your weight on it. Why? I don't know, we'll talk about it at a different time. So what happened was, when a person became a rabbi, the ordaining rabbi would put his hands on their head and ordain them. And they would make them lean on them and pass on a certain spiritual power to them. There are many deep things about this biblical ordination that we unfortunately don't have today. What we have today, we call a rabbi ordination. We're using the word smicha, but from a different term. Smicha, lismoch, to lean on, meaning to rely on. The rabbi is saying, thank you. Oh, very nice. The rabbi is saying that.
I think the ink in my printer was.
That's okay. Are there a few of these here?
I only have 4 today.
Okay, so let's share maybe like on each side of the table. We'll put out one. So, the way we use smicha today, lismoch means to rely on.
Can you post it there?
To the auto?
Okay,
Smicha means the rabbi is saying, I tested this person, I checked this person, I know this person, and I'm telling you that you can be somech, you can rely on this person, that they're an authentic continuation of the tradition of Moshe from Har Sinai. And essentially it's like a secondary term. It's not really a rabbi, because traditionally a rabbi has to be an unbroken chain from Moshe Rabbeinu in a special kind of smicha. What we have today is, I would call ordination. You ordain this person as a rabbi, but not necessarily do they have any special spiritual energy that they received from their teacher. And in essence, in the Sephardic community, the way we reflected this was that we no longer called rabbis rabbis. Rather, from that point on, we refer to rabbis as chachamim. So you'll find that Rav Ovadia Yosef is referred to as Harav Ovadia by Ashkenazim. Sfaradim refer to Harav Ovadia as Chacham Ovadia, or Chacham Mordechai Eliyahu, or Chacham Abdullah Samech. We had a few Chachamim. The term rabbi later came back into style because you're in Israel. This one's called a Chacham, this one's called a rabbi. Well, the chief rabbinate is not the chief Chachaminate, and therefore we had to go back to a title of rabbi. Mommy, that's what's bothering you. So, so tell me, what does it take? This is not kind of tissue, please. Can we add this to the list?
Oh,
I would love to
that's
reach it.
right, That's right.
You don't like? You don't want? You just want Ima?
Yeah.
Okay, so Ima's gonna be home very soon. Ima חוזרת הביתה? Yeah. No.
Mommy.
Any minute. A rabbi has to be willing to be a public figure.
Oh, okay, a
In
public figure
In a fishbowl.
in a fishbowl,
Fishbowl.
like watching.
Like a ghost in a bowl. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no question about that.
That's got to be the hardest part.
Yes.
לך תראה ליד הדלת. לך חכה ליד הדלת.
אתה רוצה לשבת פה? אתה לא צריך להקשיב לאחר. שוקע, אני רואה ששוקע. So, smicha, ordination, today is essentially it's a certification. Like you would receive certification to be a teacher, you'd receive certification to be a doctor, you'd receive certification to be a lawyer. And so the title rabbi today is much, not just looser, but much less, there's a word I'm looking for,
It's important.
much less important honorable than what it used to be. And you know, my grandfather was the rabbi of a synagogue and never had ordination. He just didn't feel, why do I need to have ordination? Either I know what I know, and then people can respect me, or I don't know anything, and then what does the title help me? There's a famous joke that was going around in Europe, in the rabbinic community, about a guy who stops one of the great rabbis of the generation on a wagon. Yeah. And he says, Rabbi, I came to you to receive a letter of ordination. Now the reason in Europe why you had to travel to look for someone to ordain you was because most rabbis in Europe did not ordain people. Most rabbis in Europe were Rosh Yeshiva. They were teaching Torah in yeshivas. And the Rosh Yeshiva traditionally in the Ashkenazi community is not a posek halachot. He's not a halachic figure, nor is he a communal figure. He is purely an academic figure. And therefore many people that studied by the Rosh Yeshivot don't have ordination from their rabbis because their rabbis did not ordain people. They were not qualified to do that. And in most towns you had either a rabbi of a synagogue or a rabbi on a Beit Din, on a rabbinic court. They were responsible for ordaining people. So for example, I'll give you a great example. In a Chassidut, a Chabad rabbi never received ordination from the Lubavitcher Rebbe.
No.
You might think that he's a student of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Is he not? Why would you go get ordination from somebody else? Traditionally, this public figure that ran the community was not the one who ordained. Rather, in Hasidic communities, they have either a rabbi of the synagogue. For example, my wife's community, there's the Rebbe. But the Rebbe is not the rabbi of the synagogue. He prays in the synagogue. Everyone bows down to him in the synagogue. But I'm kidding about bowing down. But he's the Rebbe. Everyone they part ways when it comes to the room. He's not the rabbi of the synagogue. You have a halachic question, you don't go to the Rebbe. Now, in the Lithuanian circles, this was mocked. It was like, yeah, you know why you don't go to the Rebbe? Because he doesn't know. He has to hire somebody else to answer the questions. I'm keeping my head out of the arguments between both factions of Ashkenazi Jewry. Rather, in most communities, if it was the Litvish community and their Rosh Yeshiva never ordained, and the Hasidic community, the Rebbe rarely ordained, rather it was always a synagogue rabbi or a court rabbi, a judge, rabbinic judge. And so you'd have to travel around for a rabbi who was willing to test you on your on what you were studying. And so this guy finds his rabbi in a wagon and says, Rabbi, please ordain me. So he says, well, let me ask you, have to ask you questions to be ordained. What did you study? He said, what do you mean? He said, did you study the laws of day-to-day living, or HaShamayim? First volume, Shulchan Aruch. I said, no, I didn't. Okay, maybe you studied Yored De'ah. That's what most rabbis study for. The second volume of Shulchan Aruch says, no, I didn't study Yored De'ah. So well, maybe the third volume, Even HaEzer, the laws of marriage, divorce. He says, no, I didn't study that one either. He says, in the fourth chapter, Choshen Mishpat, the fourth volume, the laws of money, court cases, property damage. He says, no, I didn't study that either. He says, well, what did you study? I said, Rabbi, if I studied something, I wouldn't need ordination to be a rabbi. And that was the understanding was that a rabbi doesn't know anything. A rabbi needs to be ordained because someone has to say you can trust him. But if he was really a Torah scholar, he would never go down the road of being a rabbi. And you'll find that it's very different than what you perceive a rabbi to be. Rather, already for a long time, we've been looking at the title rabbi as almost, if somebody has to sign on you that you are qualified to be a rabbi, it's almost like you're not worth it. And so, you have a very different, in the Sephardic world, in the Ashkenazi world, two very different perceptions of rabbi. In the Sephardic world, if you are not a posek, if you could not decide halachic decisions on your own, you weren't a rabbi. What other capacity does a rabbi serve? The rabbi is a communal leader, yes. The rabbi is a teacher, yes. The rabbi has to know everything. If he doesn't know everything, he shouldn't be a rabbi. So two very different titles of rabbi. The model of rabbi that you are familiar with is not a Sephardic rabbi. Even myself, I don't fall into the category of a Sephardic rabbi. A Sephardic rabbi needs to know how to slaughter chickens and cows, needs to know how to do a brit milah, he needs to know how to write Torah scrolls, he needs to know how to do everything. And I do have friends like that. I have friends that are one package deal, they're a chazan, they're a rabbi,
But the same way, in the old days, the father had to do the brit milah, and the people themselves slaughter their own chicken. The same way, it's no longer the case, and you have people who are specialized. So the rabbi.
So, right, very good. So the title rabbi has not just changed in regards to what is ordination, but rather what a person needs to know in order to be ordained has changed as well. It's changed as well, because today, I'll tell you, for example, Yeshiva University in New York, aside from requiring their rabbis to study the traditional areas of Jewish law you must study, they've added on top of that, they have to take classes in pastoral counseling. They have to take classes on how to deal with drug and alcohol abuse. They have to take classes on, there's a word for it, fancy word, pedagogy. Teaching skills. That's a better word, right? Teaching skills, how to be a teacher. They have classes on how to deliver public sermons, how do you start a sermon, how do you end a sermon, so on and so forth. And what they've understood is that aside from what traditionally rabbis need to know, the title rabbi today includes, and perhaps doesn't include, many things that are new to this country. It's a new style of rabbi, a different kind of rabbi. It's great that you're a scholar, but if you speak and everyone falls asleep, then what message are you passing on to the community? If people come and approach you and you know Jewish law back and forth, but you don't know how to shake someone's hand nicely, or you don't remember somebody's birthday, there are rabbis who've lost their careers over much smaller things. And so there's been a shift in the world of rabbis, but I'm focusing less on that. What does it require to get ordination? What do you know? What do you need to do to become ordained as a rabbi? I'm testing your knowledge. Smicha, what do you get?
Okay, it depends on what you learn. Because every rabbi learns something else. No two rabbis at the same time learn the same thing. I mean, they might do it from different sections of the community for being a rabbi, but as you did, yours was marriage. Somebody else might be a shepherd and knows all the laws of that. And somebody else might be the marriage counselor. You knows everything about marriage. And then there's somebody else who studies all the laws about business and how to act in business and how not to act in business and what's right and what's wrong. So there are definitely areas in which you can become a rabbi. Not that you don't know everything, but your speciality. Every rabbi has a speciality today.
Can I summarize what you just said?
Yes.
What Avril is saying is that to become a rabbi, you have to study a certain amount of Jewish law. Today, you might decide to study different kinds of Jewish law, but the bottom line is to become ordained as a rabbi, it's not about how much Chumash you know, or it's not about how much Talmud you've studied, but rather how much Jewish law you know. Again, why would this be true? What about the other things? Why just law? There's Jewish philosophy, there's Chumash, there's
community, and community comes up with a lot of questions.
Okay, so let's say better. Twofold. When are you going to study Chumash? When are you going to study Torah, Parsha? When are you going to study this?
But you have to do that as well. But it's not your main portion of what you study.
So let me make a better argument. It's expected by the time you're coming to study how to be a rabbi that you know those things.
Correct.
There are certain basics you need to know. The question now is what separates you from the average Jew who knows? You need to know more. You need to be an authority on something. The area, most Jews know the parasha. Most Jews know a little bit about Jewish philosophy. Most learned Jews know a lot of these things. But, complicated questions arise that are legal Jewish questions. It could be Shabbat, it could be kosher, it could be marriage, it could be divorce, it could be questions about tzedakah, monetary things. But these questions come up to the rabbi. So what the rabbi needs to know is a certain amount of Jewish law. I'll agree with you on this. And I agree with you
They can't
that
answer, you go to appointment.
that was the role of a rabbi in a community. You know, my grandfather probably never had to go ask the rabbi a question on what week's parsha was it. If he didn't know the weekly parsha, then probably he wouldn't be coming to synagogue. That was just obvious.
Yes.
But what he did go ask a rabbi about was what happens when my wife messed up something in the kitchen and the chicken went into the dairy pot. Or that was that we don't know. Why don't we go ask the rabbi about? Okay.
Yes, but then you go with the difference between this one and this one.
Okay, so let's talk now about what are the different ordinations of rabbis. I once did this with a few of you. We spoke about it, but to summarize, there are 3 levels of rabbinic ordination.
Yes.
Most
BA, MA, and
yeah, like a pigeon. Most rabbis don't even know there are 3 different levels of rabbinic ordination. But let's talk about what ordination was in Talmudic times. There were 3 categories. One was called Yoreh Yoreh. Yoreh Yoreh means my rabbi gave me permission to. The word teacher in Hebrew means it's called Moreh. Moreh, teacher. What do we call the Jewish Bible? Torah. Same root of hora'ah, of teaching, of educating. To render legal decisions, to teach the word of God, you need to have a license to do that. You can't just pull things out of your hat and your back pockets and expect that people are going to believe you. So when people would get ordained, what are you doing? When people would get ordained, they would. It's a double word. Yoreh Yoreh. Yoreh Yoreh is the rabbinic ordination of I've allowed this person to render legal decisions. The next level up was called Yadin Yadin. So the person would have a Yoreh Yoreh, a permission to rule Jewish law. But then, on top of that, they would study Yadin Yadin, which is to be a judge. Because the word for law in Hebrew is Din. The word for a judge in Hebrew, Dayan. The word for a rabbinic court in Hebrew is Bet Din. So the word Din, Yadin Yadin, is I'm giving him permission not just to render halachic decisions one-on-one or inside of a community, but this person is now ordained to be sitting on a court of law where they could divorce people, they could convert people. It's a one-up to your local rabbi.
Is this only in Talmudic times?
Talmudic times. Now there was a 3rd level in Talmudic times, and this was the most complicated area of Jewish law. It might sound funny to you. It was called Matir Peter Chamor.
Chamor is donkey.
It's a donkey, you're right. Chamor.
In Taf, Peter?
Yeah, Pei Tet Resh. One who was able to redeem a firstborn donkey. Sounds complicated. Basically, the firstborn of every kind, the firstborn child, you do a pidyon haben for them, a firstborn animal, firstborn fruits.
But that doesn't work for everybody because it works if you
Are not a Kohen, not a Levi, not a C-section. Right, okay. So there are details to these laws. Basically, I have a donkey, my firstborn donkey. I want to know how I can use it without having to donate it to the temple. So there were rabbis that their expertise wasn't these legal nuances. It was like one above. It was a very specific specialty of Jewish law, which today doesn't happen really anymore. And so that level of ordination has been gone for about 2,000 years in the Jewish people. We're not busy talking about donkeys. It was a very specialized. You have to imagine if there's a doctor and there's a surgeon, there's also like a specialist neurosurgeon who knows exactly. This was a specialized neurosurgeon. People stopped having brains, so they didn't even have a need for them anymore. Meaning, if the man was to lose his brain, so you wouldn't need a specialized neurosurgeon anymore. The same thing, this whole concept of donkeys and redeeming them in the temple, and it just didn't happen. And so we were left with 2 levels of rabbinic ordination, which later went back to being 3 levels of rabbinic ordination, because we added a category that was lower than Yoreh Yoreh. We added a category called Rav Umanhig, a rabbi and a leader. Now this category is not universal in the Jewish community. Rav, like rabbi, Umanhig, and a leader. A leader.
it sounds
like this one.
So to summarize, today there are 3 kinds of rabbinic ordination. Rav Umanhig is like a BA. You are a rabbi. You are a leader. You are qualified by us. We sign your papers that someone can hire you as a rabbi in the community. What are you allowed to do with Rav Umanhig papers? Essentially, if someone comes to ask you a question on kosher, a question on Shabbat, you're allowed to tell them whatever it says in the Code of Jewish Law. You can pass on Jewish information. you are not ordained to render your own legal decisions. For example, if someone were to come to you with a novel question in Jewish law, you have to refer them up the pay grade to somebody who has a yoreh, somebody who's able to, meaning they haven't just been tested on information, but they've been tested on their ability to think through a situation. It's two different levels. Don't worry about sounding snobby. I'm just telling you how it works. So many people will get Rav Manhig after studying for a certain amount of time in yeshiva, or for studying sections of Jewish law that are not earth-shattering but need to know. And then there's Yoreh Yoreh. Yoreh Yoreh is the level of, we allow this person to render their own novel legal decisions. They could write a book, they could put out rulings, they could decide that something is allowed, something's not allowed. It doesn't make them infallible, it just gives them the authority, the license to do so. A doctor can prescribe medicine and still be wrong, which is why he has malpractice insurance. But if a doctor were to prescribe a medication and it was wrong, and then they come out after him, and it turns out he wasn't even licensed to be a doctor, he just went to a few years of medical school, he's in big trouble. And so this is the it doesn't mean that everything he knows is right. What it means is that he has the qualifications to render such decisions. And the third category is today the highest level of rabbi in the Jewish world, and that is one who sits on a rabbinic court. And that's one who's a rabbinic judge, and he sits down and renders real-time decisions that are a big deal. Divorce, writing Gittin is a very specialized area of Jewish law. Most rabbis don't deal with it. It's not something that happens every day. Gittin, writing a divorce contract. Conversion, so accepting somebody into the Jewish faith, has always been on the level of a rabbinic court. And you need a court to do that. And it's right that the rabbi at the local elementary school shouldn't be converting people to Judaism. It's not his role in the Jewish community. Go stand at the door. Go look for Iman at the door. And this third level, if I was talking about time, if it takes you a few years to study for the first certificate, Rav Manhig, which is this one right here, this certificate is like an elementary, you can be called Rabbi so-and-so. The next level takes about another 3 or 5 years, sometimes 7 years, to get that certification. That one. And then to be a judge takes, on top of that, between 7 to 15 years.
So you've got a while to go.
I'm not shooting for that. I don't see myself sitting on a rabbinic court. Ordination. So let's talk about who gets ordained. What do you have to study to be ordained? How many rabbis? Do you know what kind of smicha your rabbi has?
No. Yes, I know.
Okay.
Okay.
So you know. Who else knows?
I know for you.
Next one. Did you even know that there were different kinds of rabbis?
Yes.
No, I didn't know.
Well, in the conservative and the reform movement, they go to rabbinic schools under that umbrella.
Right.
However many years they go, and they get, I guess they graduate and they get their
BAs and PhDs
but in their movements, they do all the things you or any Orthodox rabbi does.
Okay.
For that,
I'm not familiar enough with the system to tell you how it meaning what you have to do there to become a rabbi, I can only deal with the system I'm familiar with, which is the Orthodox one. It's not, I just don't know. I don't know what you have to study at JTS to become a rabbi, or what I don't know. I'm not familiar with it. The rabbis that you know probably fall into the categories either Rav Manhig or Yoreh Yoreh. Now you might think these are hard certificates to get, and they are if you study them properly. There are people today who are willing to give you all kinds of certifications and all kinds of amounts of time. And there are rabbis today who walk around with fancy titles of rabbis that they didn't study anything to become those rabbis. One of the chief rabbis in Israel was recently busted for ordaining a lot of his family members and friends. That way they could serve in positions of authority. And they never studied for a day in rabbinic school. This is the kind of reality which I deal with. Sometimes I say, I worked really hard for this. I meet somebody else and I ask them a question, and in Jewish law they don't even know what I'm talking about. It's imagine if a lawyer were to find out that he went to law school, passed the bar, he's in hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, And instead, this one got his degree online in 10 minutes. In 10 minutes, and he paid $600 for a certificate. And now, when he goes to apply for a job, they treat him with equal credentials.
Right.
That's the feeling of frustration that most rabbis today have. And it's led to a certain decay in what is a rabbi, who becomes a rabbi, who's qualified to be a rabbi. And out of courtesy, we try not to tell other people that that rabbi is not a rabbi. But in the hush-hush of the rabbinic world, we almost know who falls out on which part of the rabbinic spectrum. And today it's as simple as knowing which denomination of Orthodoxy they come from. Because there are denominations of Orthodoxy that, remember the story about the Rosh Yeshiva? Like, if I would know something, I wouldn't have to get ordained as a rabbi. When I studied to be a rabbi, I was still in Baltimore. Before I met Rabbi Perez, I was already going for ordination. I was 18 years old, and I decided I wanted to be a rabbi. Everyone else told me I was crazy. You don't study to be a rabbi unless you need money to get a job. Then you go for a quick crash course in rabbinic training, and they send you out somewhere so you can make a salary. But until then, why would you waste your time studying to be a rabbi? And the truth is that in yeshiva, most rabbis are not ordained. Because to be a rabbi in the yeshiva, you don't have to be a communal leader. You don't have to render legal decisions. You just have to be an academic. Academics we have plenty of in the Jewish world. And so they have the title rabbi. But if you would ask them, where is your ordination? They would tell you, I'm not ordained as a rabbi. I'm accepted in this specific community as a leader. But I'm not a rabbi. So the definition of rabbi there already means you don't have to be ordained to be a rabbi. And there are many such communities where ordination is not necessary to be considered a rabbi. Yes?
Where do people go if they want to become a rabbi in 3 minutes? Who gives them these?
I'd rather not say out loud.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that out loud.
Okay? But I can show you in a few minutes. You let me show you in a few minutes? Okay. I'll show you in a few minutes.
Well, maybe that'll be my next career.
What are you waiting for? It's 3 minutes. What are you? There's
Actually,
nothing.
it's true. We can advance someone,
Yeah.
Can a woman be a rabbi?
So ordination. Let me show you for a minute how ordination works.
I'm sorry?
In order to be,
What's behind me?
it's a fan.
Oh.
I thought it was a heater by a kitchen.
Oh.
In order to be ordained as a rabbi,
I'm freezing.
I had to study the following things. I'll show you. This one I didn't have a chance to study. The laws of Shechita, Jewish slaughter, I didn't study. Remember when I was here for 9 months in America? Yeah. I didn't have a chance to finish. I studied, but didn't have a chance to finish the laws of mikvaot, the laws of how to build a kosher mikvah. I didn't get that chance. So can I put them here?
Oh, but you're learning now.
I also, in those 9 months, learned but didn't get a chance to be ordained on the laws of Shabbat. So I'll show you. It's right here. So this is what I missed in my 9 months by Rav Peretz. These 3 books. Since then, he's wrote a few more that we didn't have a chance to study, but these are the 3 books. I'm putting them right here. Well, we did study together. It was a bunch of us in the Shiva. The laws of meat and milk, basar b'chalav. The laws of marriage, doing chupot and kiddushin and the marriage contracts. These are Shulchan Aruch, Torahs, Bet Yosef. We studied the entire volumes. The laws of wine from a non-Jew, baking cookies, the laws of kashrut, the specific details of kashrut. The laws of nida, family purity, another volume. And the laws of mixing, when meat falls into a not kosher pot, what happens if you put a dairy spoon in what if in a chametz, pesach, all of those laws of kosher. I was a slave to these books for the 4 years that I was in Israel. This is our life. Every page of this book, we study. On top of that, in Rav Peretz's yeshiva, he had to study his own book on the laws of kosher, of combinations, meat, milk, chametz. We studied the laws of Shabbat, and we studied the laws of kashrut, and we studied all the specific details of other laws. And another volume of his on the laws of marriage, and another volume on how to be a rabbi. Practically, how do you teach? How do you write sermons? How do you render halakhic decisions? When I was in Israel studying this, I came across a friend of mine who I had in high school, and I saw him not even a year later, and he introduced himself as Rabbi so-and-so. wow, how did you become a rabbi? I said, oh, I'm in a famous, prestigious rabbinic school. I heard about the rabbinic school. How long does it take to become a rabbi? I said, the program is an 8 to 10 month program. Interesting. So what do you study? Well, he gave me the book.
Oh,
Orthodox program?
that's it?
Orthodox program?
Don't read it out loud, please. You can tell me from what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And when
That
I
doesn't
saw-
surprise me.
Can we see it?
Not out loud, just
I
pass it.
promise I won't do it without.
When
I'll be good.
this was my reaction was, really? Why did I sign up for your program? But the truth is,
want
and
more.
this
Oh,
is
you
not,
would
God
never
forbid,
have accepted that.
God forbid, this is not from a place of snobbiness, but I am from the smaller students that came out of our parents' yeshiva. I'm telling you this not out of humility, but out of the truth. From our yeshiva came out chief rabbis and judges and authors of Jewish law. I'm from the small guys, the small fish that were swimming in that tank. But we had to have a basic knowledge of Jewish law, and to Rabbi Peretz, this is the basic knowledge of Jewish law before he's willing to send you out.
It's very simple.
To this one rabbi,
2 pages.
that's what he had to study.
So I have a question.
And we shared the same title, and on his certificate, it also says Yoreh Yoreh. He's allowed to render his own novel halachic decisions.
Based on that.
So what does it feel like to study and really be a professional, if you will, in the core traditional sense? As in any profession, someone does what you did. And then to get out into the world and to find you are swimming in the same sea, so to speak, with people that did a 9-month program, a 4-month program, a 30-day program, and they're marketing this and they're marketing that, and here you are, trying to move through the mud to get your thing up and going, and you've done all of this. What does that feel like? Because I think whether it be a lawyer that studied at Harvard, competing, that's not the right word, but you can use it for lack of a better one, competing against someone that went to, a not so good school but is a better marketer, there's got to be frustrations around that. Because most people, at the end of the day, they're not going to ask you if you read these 5 books and studied this with Rabbi Peretz. They'll never get that far in their conversation with you.
No. First off, the way they judge a rabbi today is how long your beard is. That's what makes you a big rabbi today. So my beard is trimmed, and so in general, he must not be such a serious rabbi.
That's not true.
No, I'm not offended. I'm telling you what it is. What makes a person a rabbi today? Does his beard go down to his belt? Does it go down to his chest? How big is his beard? There was a rabbi, actually, a big Sephardic rabbi. He was one of Rabbi Yonatan Yosef's good friends. His name was Chacham ben Zion Abba Shaul. He was a Persian rabbi from the famous rabbis of Iran, came to Israel. He lived in the old city in Jerusalem. Chacham ben Zion Abba Shaul had a very short trimmed beard, but he was like a famous Sephardic rabbi of his generation. And they used to tell me, why do you have such a trimmed beard? You're a big rabbi. Everyone else walks around with it. And I said, I'll tell you the truth. When I render a halachic decision, I want people to follow my decision because they know what's inside of my head and not because of the length of my beard. So one of his students was in the audience and he said, I'm going to be like my rabbi. And he trimmed his beard. And the next day he came back to Rabbi Ben Zion Abba Shaul and said, I got fired from my job as a rabbi. He said, why? He said, because I didn't have a beard. So Rabbi Ben Zion Abba Shaul said, well, then I have to tell you that your community only listened to you because of your beard and not because of what was inside of your head. So maybe you should fill up your head a little bit more, or find a community that's not looking for a beard. It was a funny story, but it's a tragic story to tell you what the state of affairs of the rabbinic community looks like today. What do I feel like? I don't want to come from a place of ego. I'm telling you again, I have friends of mine that double or triple the amount of information that they study. And I call them when I have questions. If I want to ask them a question, Rabbi Peretz is in Germany in a conference, so I call up one of my friends, the chief rabbi over there, chief rabbi over here. What I feel is that the title has been so cheap that I'm almost embarrassed to have it myself. And what's worse, when did it really hit home? When I published my book. And I started getting phone calls or emails. Oh yeah, well the rabbi in our community said that you don't know what you're talking about. And for me, it's a matter of, let me tell you, I might not be right. You can argue. I'm sure that I'm wrong. According to someone, I'm wrong. I can imagine. But this rabbi is not qualified to claim that what I write is incorrect. If he was another rabbi with a different ordination from a different place, his words would have some weight. But in the Jewish community, they don't know the difference. And if this rabbi said the book is no good, we're not going to study it.
But I just want to say one thing about writing in general. The minute you write something and you send it out to the world, if you will, whether it's sending out to the rabbinic world, the Jewish world, the general world, whatever it is, you're open for every human being's point of view, opinion,
Absolutely.
email, whatnot. And you've got to develop a tough skin.
No, I'm offended.
No matter
offended
what you
I'm
write.
not. You asked the feeling. I'm giving you a feeling.
Yeah.
The feeling was, and to the average layman, they don't know the difference between this rabbi or that rabbi. And when I went to print my book, I didn't print my book al da'at atzmi, my own intuition. I went to 3 rabbis, leading rabbis in our community, not here in San Diego, of a rabbinic community, Rabbi Peretz, Rabbi Katzin, and Rabbi Kozma, and they signed on this book, they read this book, they studied this book, and they signed that everything in this book is correct. And when a person tells me, listen, I studied this to be a rabbi, and your opinion is disqualified in Jewish law, the question is, what do you really know about Jewish law? But I can't say that. Because if I say that, I'm undermining some of these rabbi, I'm undermining the community leader. So I'd rather just take the blow, and I was quiet about it. But you're right. You can't say whatever you want to say. Yeah, Mar, you saying something?
But yes.
Oh, I don't know if you're raising your hand or you're
Yes,
blocking the light.
Both. But when you wrote this, you didn't say, my opinion is this, my interpretation. You said, this is where this is written. Here's the reference, here's the reference, here's the reference. So you did it, well, go refer to Shulchan Aruch, or go refer to wherever the reference is. It's not like you made this up. You're just reporting what these great rabbis of past have said about it.
There's a famous rabbi in San Diego. Every year puts out a pamphlet. A famous rabbi in LA. Every year puts out a pamphlet on the laws of Passover. What's kosher, what's not kosher. And it's considered the authoritative list on what is kosher and not kosher for Passover. And you look to that list, and you won't find one halachic source for what he says. He doesn't source himself. He doesn't quote another book. He doesn't mention the Shulchan Aruch. He doesn't quote the Talmud. He doesn't write about the Rambam. He doesn't mention differing opinions. And to me, that book is it's an intellectually dishonest publication. But that's the way the world is. So how do we feel about it? If I'm feeling this, you can imagine what Rabbi Peretz feels like. You know, Rabbi Peretz sits in Jerusalem, and he now had the honor of the chief rabbi of Israel sitting at the table with him. And the chief rabbi doesn't accept converts that Rabbi Peretz converts.
Really?
Sure. Because he didn't study in the right place with the right connections. And so what happens? Rabbi Peretz, when he wants to convert someone, and he needs it to be accepted by the chief rabbi, so his student, Rabbi Peretz's student, he's on the list of approved conversions from the chief rabbi. And Rav Peretz has to degrade himself and go ask his student, can you sign on this conversion contract so that this rabbi so-and-so, who's 40 years Rabbi Peretz's junior, so he'll accept that my convert is kosher? That's the rabbinic world.
Okay, so
And that's very good.
That's what I said,
That is the
politics.
political side of the rabbinic
world.
world.
That's what I really meant. And so it's very similar to what's happening in the political world right now, here in America, or in Israel, or in the world. Is it a religion? Is it a religion? Is it Torah anymore? Is it the Torah from Mount Sinai? Or we just invented a new rules to how we live today?
Did you hear what Paulette said? Paulette said when you write something and you put it out, you kind of have to be willing to accept whatever's going to come right back at you. And so I'll explain. When a person becomes ordained, or a person converts to Judaism, or a person marries someone, you can say, for me, this marriage is a great marriage. For me, this conversion is a great convert. But when it comes down to facts, you have to be honest and say, I know that if I will convert through this rabbi, he could be the greatest rabbi of the world. I won't be accepted as a Jew. And if I'm still willing to go along with that, great. Only God is going to judge me. When Rav Peretz converts somebody, they're very Jewish. Trust me. I'd marry them. I don't know, I can't. But my son could marry them. But I have to be honest that the moment that conversion happens, I have to be ready for what's coming out at me at the world. And the world today is full of these politics. And when we deal with the question, for example, so can a woman be a rabbi? There's more to this question than legally can she be a rabbi, but is the world of Jews politically willing yet to accept a woman as their rabbi? If they're not accepting men to be rabbis from prestigious academies, Are they ready? It could be it doesn't make a difference. So we're just going to fight the war. But this is part of the equation. Do we have the right connections? Are we working with the right people? At the end of the day, this is a political game. There are politics that are involved here. Is it a religion?
I'm sure if somebody will come with a lot of money and give it to the right cause, no, it's true. I'm sure they can change the rules and bend the rules to suit, that donor.
Depends who.
Huh?
Depends who.
Who's
Some people will take money and some people
Really?
Yes. I think
sometimes in
Oh, yeah,
situations
yeah.
like
Told the
these in
story
life,
last week,
people say, I'm just going to take my marbles and go home. So what does that mean in the world of Judaism? You look at the history of Judaism. Where did the conservative, the reform, and whatever other movements there are out there come from? They came from this.
Uh-huh.
People saying, I'm going to take my marbles,
Mm-hmm.
and 80 other people went with them. And
Why-
they
why
twisted
start-
this and
why
they
start
twisted
there?
that.
Why?
You're bringing me examples that are 300 years old. Our main aggressor against us in our history, in our exile, were the Christians. The Christians who followed a man who essentially also split off from the world of Judaism.
correct.
Whether he was correct or not is not my point, but he split off because he felt that there was a politically corrupt system and he didn't want to. He took his marbles and he went home.
Then,
Yeah.
yes.
And so understand for me what happened. 2,000 years we're having inquisitions and crusades and pogroms because of a corrupt system that it's not like an internal matter. This is a matter that has changed world history. The Baal Shem Tov broke off from the traditional community because he felt that there was, God forbid, I'm not comparing Jesus and the Baal Shem Tov. Understand? There's always been problems.
different.
The Baal Shem Tov said, this rabbinic establishment is corrupt. I'm walking away, creating my own. Why were there opposition to the Hasidim? It wasn't just because they prayed more than they studied Torah. It wasn't because they were studying Kabbalah. It was because these people were undermining the establishment. And the establishment does not appreciate being undermined.
That's right.
And
Anywhere,
it continues
ever.
somewhere
Anywhere.
else.
Right.
Anywhere,
Exactly.
ever.
Ever.
Exactly.
It's power, and when a group has
There you go.
power,
Yeah.
they don't want to relinquish it.
I don't know if my wife taught this on Shabbat, but she was learning. I was reading one of her books that she was learning. And this book made a very strong argument that the original opponents to the Hasidic movement were not the rabbis. Rather, the original opponents, I don't know if you know that European Jewry was built up by it was a two-headed leader. There was the rabbi of the community and the Parnas, the Gvir, he was like the wealthy, imagine a Jewish mayor. He was the one who, I'll get it done. He was the godfather, so to speak. And this personality at times was very righteous and worked in tandem with the rabbi, and at times was at odds with the rabbi. You have to imagine today, it would be almost what the president of the synagogue is versus the rabbi of the synagogue. In bigger synagogues.
What's the difference, yeah?
So, sometimes they fight, sometimes they work together, both of them have a cause of being tyrants. That's essentially what happens. These Jewish council mayors were actually very upset because the Hasidim broke out of the synagogue, the Hasidim changed the text, the Hasidim opened up their own schools. Essentially, they were running a parallel religious community that undermined their own. And so what do? They applied pressure on the rabbis to outlaw these guys in order to keep their throne. It's not the first time in history.
Over and over again.
This happens all over the place. The Karaites, they didn't split away from Judaism because of the same reason. All kinds of things happen. The Reform and Conservative movements. Also, I'm putting conservative on the side because that was a reaction to the Reform movement, not necessarily to the Orthodox movement. But the Reform movement also felt that there was a certain corruption that was going on, and they opened up their own movement. Now, don't understand from me for a moment. I'm not a Reform rabbi. I differ strongly in very harsh terms with the way the Reform movement has handled Jewish law and Jewish tradition and Jewish texts and sources. But you cannot deny that part of their issue, it could be part of their issue was a certain progressive liberalism that was sweeping through Europe, but there was part of the issue that we just don't want to be part of your community anymore. We don't need to be. We're not a captive audience anymore. And the same thing is happening today. Today in Israel, you have a chief rabbinate. And all of what you've heard about in the news, whether it's rabbis in New York who are undermining the chief rabbinate, or Rabbi Amsalem sitting in the Knesset, or used to, who was undermining the chief rabbinate, or if it's Rabbi Ovadia Yosef who's undermining the chief rabbinate, or when he became the chief rabbi, it was the other chief rabbis undermining his chief rabbinate. There's an establishment, and not always is the establishment as holy as it pretends to be. And the question of who decides what is law and who decides what isn't. Unfortunately, in Judaism, you don't have the luxury of being stupid. You don't have the luxury of being uneducated. If you believe every person that comes to you with a beard and a hat and tells you he's a rabbi, the onus is on you. You're the one who's ignorant. Rather, you have to have some kind of knowledge, of elementary education, of understanding, so who's real, who's not, who could be real but chose not to be, and you'll very quickly see that there are two completely different worlds of rabbis. There are rabbis in this town that on a philosophical level, I don't agree with them at all. On a halachic level, I don't agree with them at all. But there's a certain genuinity in them. When the rabbi stands up for something, I don't agree with what he stands up for. But the fact that he has a stand on something, that he can't be bought with money, it puts us at the same table. And so that person automatically becomes a friend. Not necessarily because the enemy of my enemy is my friend, but rather because a person who shares the same common values of, this is my interpretation of Torah. It's not yours, but you can't buy me out. You can't put someone on my case who's going to change my mind. I respect that. And there's a very unique alliance of people, not just in San Diego, but around the world, who don't agree on anything, but agree on the same basic values. That being said, ordination, it's a big deal of what makes a rabbi or doesn't make a rabbi. But if today a boy can get ordination in 10 months, and 8 months, and 3 months, and 3 minutes, the argument is, why can't a lady who studied for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, how does she feel? She studied all the books. She might know more than the rabbi. Why can't she have some kind of title?
Especially if it's a teacher.
So that brings us to definition number 2.
Right.
Put ordination aside. We're not talking about whether a lady can be ordained or not. Can a lady study these legal matters that a rabbi studies?
Yes.
Absolutely. So the question is, what else makes a rabbi a rabbi? Maybe that's if ordination is not the only thing that makes a rabbi, so maybe there's something else that stops her from being a rabbi. The next thing on our list was a teacher. Are all rabbis teachers?
No.
And there are different teachers. I mean,
Well, what is a teacher? So what do you think teacher? What do you think?
Somebody who's a mentor.
You're talking about like a one-on-one teacher, like a guide.
I think of someone who can.
who broaden the community's knowledge and wealth of Jewish history, tradition, laws, everything.
So she's saying on a communal level, broadening people's horizons through education. So that would mean communal classes, lectures that are on topic of something.
yes.
But teaching could also be on a one-on-one, or when someone calls up to ask you a question, a halachic question, you're telling them the answer. It's a teaching also. It is
Teaching, but I would throw it under the definition of no. I would
Yeah, I agree with you.
a scholar who interprets Jewish law. Let's keep that for 10. You're right. You're right, Marlene. That is a definition, but I don't know that it is teaching, but it's more than teaching. That's already. And if that's the case, then many people are teachers.
It's a very general term.
It is a very general term. What about you're missing a whole department of teachers, though?
Well, there are all sorts of different teachers.
Are there rabbis who teach in schools who don't have communities?
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yes.
We have said nothing about a rabbi being a spiritual leader.
We did. It's on our list. We just didn't get there yet. It's number 4.
Okay.
You're right. You're
You know,
good. We're going to get there.
There are teachers that impart a certain amount of facts that a student needs to know. There are teachers who impart questions and put together scenarios for a student to expand his thinking.
Well, that's different styles of
Different
teaching.
styles
That's
of
what makes
teaching.
a better teacher.
Exactly,
Yes.
and encourages
Right.
each student to go forth and expand in their areas of
That's a
expertise,
rarity.
etc.
Yes.
I mean, there are a variety
It's
of different
dawn.
teachers, and I don't think any two teachers
Then you
have
don't have to
the
challenge,
same
exactly.
style.
Okay, so different styles would exist in any discipline of teaching. You have 2 geometry teachers who teach differently, or 2. But talk to me about the rabbis who are teachers that don't have communities.
Yes.
Right.
I know plenty of those.
You know plenty, especially in your
Just-
community, you have such rabbis.
Does David Aaron have a community? He's got an institute.
No, very good, very good.
I mean, he's an
Rabbi David
excellent
Aaron.
teacher. I'm just blown away by his ability. We're talking about Rabbi David Aaron. I
a
started
colleague of
reading
mine in Jerusalem I
his
used to work
books
for.
last week, and I'm blown away by his ability to take very complex
And almost
ideas
pass
and
them off as simple.
speak to us like, yeah, girls, I understand this. You know what I mean?
He's-
Without footnotes and heavy-duty
You should know that when he
intellectual
teaches
stuff.
rabbis, he teaches the most complicated. My brains used to fry in his classes. I mean, he has like texts and books and sources, but when he translates that over to a layman or to yeshiva boys or to students or seminary girls, it comes out like
That's beautiful.
It's
like
a
it's
gift.
so
He
simple.
absolutely has a gift
And
of being able
Rabbi
to.
David Aaron.
Yeah.
Is
I encourage you to read
unfortunately
his book.
an underexposed mikubal in our generation, a big Kabbalist in Kabbalistic philosophy. We taught together. Most of the Kabbalah that I studied from him.
But the rabbis that teach at the school where
Rabbi David Aaron doesn't have a synagogue. Is he a rabbi?
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
Okay, so we can have a rabbi who's not a communal leader. So maybe we should take off number 3, is a leader of a community. Unless you can argue to me that.
Well, it's an online community sometimes.
You should argue me better. Just forget online. The school is a community. Maybe perhaps he's not a community leader, as in he doesn't have weddings and bar mitzvahs and I don't know, whatever happens in a synagogue, but 6 days out of the week he has a community which is a school community.
He specializes in education.
Very good.
That's his specialization.
And they have a degree in it.
So maybe we have
they
to
have
change.
a degree in education.
Maybe we have to change the understanding of what is a rabbi of a community, not necessarily a community like ours, but a community. This is I think you don't know this well enough, but this Monday morning group is its own sub-community.
Sure.
And whereas much as I would love to say that you're part of my community, you don't know everybody that comes to my synagogue on Shabbat, and they don't know you. And the funny thing is, they once told me, "Oh, it's only us in the synagogue." I said, "No, there are a lot of people you don't know." And the best way would be to cross-pollinate between the two sub-communities, but in essence, you are also a community. And so if there was a person whose only job was to teach you, I would also argue that they're a leader of a community, just not traditionally what is considered a communal leader.
Like the school.
Like a school, or a yeshiva, a rosh yeshiva who teaches in a yeshiva. Probably never sits in the front of a synagogue and gives sermons. It's not his thing. When they need to do a bar mitzvah, he doesn't deal with that kind of stuff. He doesn't do weddings. It's not his job. A different kind of community. Actually, maybe historically, I'll fill you in on a little problem. Jewish tradition is most documented and recorded and codified by Ashkenazi Jews. When you would write a book about, so what is a rabbi traditionally, most of your sources will be Ashkenazi sources. The reason is, we mentioned this a few months ago, Ashkenazi Jewry took tradition very seriously. They took customs very seriously. They took the way things were done very seriously. In the Ashkenazi books, do you open the curtain on the Torah scroll, do you open it to the right, or do you open it to the left? It's a big deal. There are big fights about this. Does the table you read the Torah, is it in the middle of the synagogue? I mean, does there have to be a row of chairs in front of it? Or is it up against the ark of the synagogue? Fights to who knows where, how it happens. The tradition says this, tradition says that. I'm not mocking it, but it's the most documented in the Sephardic world. I wouldn't know to tell you where the ark was in the synagogue. I don't know. Nobody bothered to write it down for me. It wasn't considered that important. To a plus, there's a plus of we don't get concerned over petty details, and a minus of I'm not really sure if they gave something importance or not because they didn't record it in their books. So what is a rabbi? Who does the wedding? Who performs the wedding ceremony?
The rabbi.
The rabbi. But which rabbi?
Which
I'll give you a story. I'll give you a story.
Rabbi of my son's yeshiva, or is it the rabbis of a kehillat?
Very good. When
That's an
imagine
example.
Itai is going to get married, in a few years. Yeah, and so he has two rabbis. The rabbi of his community and the rabbi of his yeshiva, who he studied from in his adult life. Traditionally, his family's rabbi would probably be the rabbi of the community. And traditionally, the honor of doing the wedding would be given to the rabbi of the community. What happened in Europe was as soon as yeshivas became standardized, the argument was, it's great that mom and dad, that's your rabbi. But my rabbi, who I've spent the majority of my adult life studying from, is the rabbi of my yeshiva.
But they didn't have a difference of customs. Here,
Yes, but I'm not just talking about customs. Here it's a matter of honor. You have to know not just honor, forget honor. It's also the way rabbis made money. Rabbis were given very meager sums to live off of. That never changed in our history. And what rabbis relied on was, sometimes there'll be somebody who'll come by and help them out a little bit. Sometimes there'll be somebody who'll do a wedding and they'll help them out a little bit. There'll be a brit milah. The rabbis didn't charge for these things, but very often it was directly connected to their source of income. This boils down to, so in whose jurisdiction does the wedding fall out into? Does the son choose the... Now, complicate matters further. What about the girl's side of the family? Now, it's great if they all go to the same synagogue, but she has her own rabbi from childhood. Well, she has her own rabbi from childhood in the synagogue, right? Very rarely did girls go on to higher education, but today you have girls that go to seminary for 2 years, 3 years. They have their own rabbis. Interestingly enough, my brother-in-law had this question. It's a Hasidic family, but his daughter studied in Israel, and really where she became connected to her religion was her rabbi in Israel. Her rabbi wanted to marry her. But it's unheard of in that community that the girl's rabbi will marry somebody. You can come to the wedding, we'll invite you, we'll put you up on the head table. Come on, chuppah, seriously? And the fight was a bloody battle. And there's a book that I have on the rabbinate in Europe, and there's an entire chapter dedicated to the fights between the Rosh Yeshiva and the rabbi of the community. And it didn't help matters. It
just don't stop.
That at that point in time, it didn't help matters that in that point in time, the rabbi title was already decaying. And the Rosh Yeshiva, who was a scholarly academic, very often looked at the rabbi of the community as, oh, you're the one who studied for 8 months so you could get a job? Aha. You want to do the wedding? Fine, let's see if you can do a wedding properly. It was almost this disdain towards community rabbis. And this disdain it's not a joke, it's not small. When I go to yeshiva in Baltimore, I dress down. It's not comfortable for me in yeshiva to be a rabbi. I don't introduce myself as a rabbi. I don't tell them that I serve as a rabbi. It's not comfortable.
Why not?
Because the goal there, if you were a rabbi, you're a cop-out. You should have sat here for years and become a scholar in some Talmudic academy somewhere. Oh, you went to go help people? Okay. You're a social worker, right? Oh, you're a therapist. That's cute. That's how we're looked at.
Oh, wow.
Only when I went to Rabbi Peretz's yeshiva did Rabbi Peretz tell us that sitting your whole life, I'm not going to say how, and learning, it's great, but you're neglecting your responsibility towards the Jewish people, towards the greater community, towards the greater good of this population. I said, you could study here 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, I'll throw you out. You can keep learning when you have a job. But you owe it to a community to be their leader, to be their rabbi. And the goals changed. But when did I truly discover this? Was when I was reading a book from Rabbi Lau. Who's Rabbi Lau? Do you know Rabbi Lau?
He's the chief rabbi of Israel.
So not the current Rabbi Lau, rather his father. His father, I don't know if you know his father. He wrote a book, an autobiography. Do you know this book?
No.
Boring? Yeah. Do you know where when you're done, no. Out of the Depths? Yeah. Right, so in Hebrew it's fascinating. They translated it into English about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I don't know how long ago. Out of the Depths. It's his story as a Holocaust survivor. How he was an orphan. He didn't have parents, his brother, they took him to Israel, how he grew up, he was a...
Morning. Hi.
Out of the Depths. The story of a child of Buchenwald who returned home at last and became the chief rabbi of Israel.
They're from the family of the one who established the Dafyoni.
Yeah, Rabbi Shapira.
Yeah.
Here he has incredible stories like how he met Fidel Castro in Cuba and his meetings with the Queen of England and the Lubavitcher Rebbe, great world personalities. Rabbi Lau, like him or don't like him, the father, was the epitome of a chief rabbi. He carries himself like a chief rabbi. You almost treat him like royalty. Like when he walks into a room, he's tall. He demands a certain presence, though, and intellectually he's a brilliant man. He writes in one of his books I have, Rav Lau says that when he was in yeshiva in Panovich, the same yeshiva Rabbi Peretz went to, in Bnei Brak, and he decided he wanted to be a rabbi, so he wasn't allowed to study Shulchan Aruch inside of the yeshiva. He only allowed to study Gemara inside of a yeshiva.
Right.
Because only people who want to waste their time. There's a certain resentment, a certain disdain towards people who want to take on community pulpits.
Who's there with the Jewish people then?
It's not our problem. We're just educating scholars. This was always the problem with European Jewry. This is why the Baal Shem Tov said, I'm stopping with the scholars and creating community leaders. Wasn't that part of his fight? It used to be that scholars and laymen weren't even allowed to pray in the same synagogues in Europe. That's what the Baal Shem Tov came to fight. He was kind of like this, imagine like a 17th century hippie. He was showed up on the scene like, everybody's equal, we should love everybody, we should dance with everybody.
Right.
And it was a whole new model of Jewry.
The intellectual versus
The heart, the experience.
Yeah.
And Rabbi Laus is, yeah?
What was the point of becoming a scholar if you were only going to enrich your own learning and you weren't going to share it?
What I think or what they think?
That's good. Yeah.
Well,
It's the same argument about in Israel, whether we should have all these boys studying and learning or they should go out and do something. The argument is that there's this deep mystical, if I'm sitting and studying, it's because of me that the whole world exists.
No.
Really?
Sure.
The few? Only the few?
No, the few are holding up the whole world. If Torah learning is the purpose of humanity, and humanity is not able to dedicate their life to Torah learning, so I will be the martyr for the cause. I will live on my meager salary and sit in a room that's dark and stay up to the late hours of the night studying and studying and studying. So the Jewish people could go work and the Jewish people could have jobs and families and kids. And when they have questions, they'll come to us because we're holding up the fort of Torah study.
That's what they believe.
That's what,
I
absolutely.
think there's something below that. I think there's a more selfish purpose.
Oh, okay.
And I think
because I can't say what I think, so you're going to say what I think.
maybe. I think the selfish purpose is that they are trying to figure out or get a direct experience of the mystery. And I think they say, yes, I'm doing it, so, to hold up Judaism and whatnot. There's so much that's mysterious, so much based on faith, so much you just have to surrender to. And I think when you stay with the books and you keep studying and you go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, you're trying to have that experience. It's almost Kabbalistic, even though they're not Kabbalah.
No, but understand that Paulette is saying something true. I cannot tell you that when I sat in the Bet Midrash and I saw Rabbi Peretz every day, and we sat at tables, and in that room, the chief rabbis from Macedonia and Greece and Turkey, when they would come to the table, they also became students. And you were in this experience, the high holidays in such a place. You're praying in a room of other scholars, of other people who are on the same wavelength of studying and growth, and it's not weird to take on another custom. It's not out of the ordinary to pray for another hour. There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to. You're in this bubble of call it religion, spirituality, whatever you like to call it. Everybody wants to stay there. The question is that the point?
No,
is the point to stay there, or is it fair? Or let me ask you this: when someone's in a rehab for drug addicts, the test is not how long he can stay clean in the rehab center. The test is what happens when he goes back out on the street. Is he going to stay clean? It's great when you're able to keep these high levels of spirituality when you're in your little bubble. But when you go out and actually have to get a job or get an education or raise a family or have a wife or have children, if you're able to hold up the same or a similar level of spiritual connection, you pass the test. And there's a level above that in our circles of rabbinic leadership, and that is, are you able to not just for yourself take care of your own spirituality, but are you willing to be a beacon to other people who are looking to grow spiritually? Are you willing to say, yeah, it would have been great for me to stay in Jerusalem, but maybe San Diego needs a little bit more learning. Maybe there are people here that need to connect a little bit more. Maybe I can help other people study the things that I studied and learn from them the things that they studied and build together some bigger Jewish picture. Absolutely. But where that was an ideal, it's not the ideal in most yeshivot in the world. It's not. And rabbinic leaders, both by the parents who would rather them, okay, if you're not going to be a scholar, so go be a doctor and a lawyer, make some money. Don't go be this rabbi who's going to have to, wait for the next month to pay his rent or whatever. Don't do that. It's embarrassing for the family to. I always said, what kind of job is a rabbi for a good Jewish boy? It's not the right kind of job. But on top of that, Rav Lau said there was a certain intellectual discrimination. He said when he became the chief rabbi of Israel, and he came back to yeshiva to visit, he said they almost laughed at him behind his back. He came in with a special robe of a chief rabbi and the hat of a chief rabbi, and look who became the chief rabbi, huh? Look who thinks he's so special. He said, but when he would give sermons in the great synagogue, he would see his classmates looking into the window just to see, oh wow, they really consider him the chief rabbi. They said, but they never once gave him a handshake or never once patted him on the back and said, thank you for being a chief rabbi. And Rabbi Lau ends off this letter, and I have it in Hebrew if somebody wants to see it. Rabbi Lau says, understand what I'm telling you. He said, I didn't have to go underground to study philosophy. I didn't go underground to study secular studies. He said, I went underground in yeshiva to study rabbinics. He said, to be a rabbi, I had to hide in my dorm room study. And this level of disdain exists towards rabbis. You cannot imagine the level of disdain that exists towards a woman who wants to be a rabbi. And if I'm telling you this about Rabbi Lau, who single-handedly held up the chief rabbinate when he was the chief rabbi, I cannot tell you what it looks like for other people who are not on that level of chief rabbis. And we're not done this conversation. I know we're close to 12 o'clock. But, Ariella sat here and she had this expression of it never ends. The fights never end. Every time I come to one of these classes, I find out more problems I never knew about in the Jewish community.
Can't we just go back to the Torah?
Well, actually, it's right there. If we have to go back to the Torah, and we started it, I think, with the words, and teach them to your people, to your children. How can an intellect, a spiritual, whatever titles they want to give themselves, separate it from what the Torah literally is saying?
So let me tell you, there's a verse from King David, and this verse is sung in all the yeshivas around the world. It's a verse that says, Achad shalti me'et Hashem. I ask one thing from Hashem. Shifti bevet Adonai kol yemei chayai. Put me in the home of God all the days of my life. Lachazot benoam Hashem, so I could see the pleasantness of Hashem. It's kind of what you were getting at, a certain experience. Ulevaker behechalon, to be able to visit every so often the chambers of holiness that Hashem dwells in. And this song is sung like, let us stay forever in this yeshiva. Let us stay forever in the walls of this synagogue. Let us just pray and study. It's like a certain highlight of the yeshiva world. What people fail to understand is the words were written by King David, who did not have the luxury to sit in the study hall. Actually, the Talmud says that when King David would come into the study hall, do you know what happened to him? King David, David Melech Israel, Chai v'Kayam. We sing his name at every bar mitzvah, at every wedding. King David would come in, and they would make fun of him inside of this. Do you know this? No. The Talmud says he would come inside, and the scholars sitting in the room would say, David! They wouldn't even call him king. So what's the law of a person who took someone else's wife?
Yeah, because that's what he did.
And King David would say, they say it's liable for the death penalty. He said, but somebody who embarrasses someone else publicly is also liable for the death penalty. Exactly. And he would go take his seat. But King David had a rabbi. The rabbi, his name was?
Nathan.
Mephibosheth?
Yeah.
Mephibosheth. His name wasn't really Mephibosheth. But this rabbi, Mephibosheth, from his mouth he would always embarrass King David.
Wow.
And King David refused to stop learning from him, but he used to make fun of King David. He said, oh, you're good for nothing. And that's why there's a famous verse that King David says to Solomon, his son, Im chacham libcha bani, if your heart is wise, my son, yismach libi gam ani, my heart will also be happy. King David's claim to fame was, my rabbi made fun of me, but nobody could be wiser than King Solomon, my son, who was greater than even my rabbi. It was kind of King David's victory over the mocking that he went through his entire life. And you look at a person like King David. His whole life he's riddled by his family. His son is trying to kill him. His parents didn't want him. He was ordained as a king and Saul tried to wipe him out. His whole life he's being attacked. And then Hashem gives him a son like Shlomo HaMelech. He lifts up this flag of King David's kingdom. It's almost the story about King David. If you want to know a personality in your life you should connect to, David HaMelech. He's the one. He's the only one. He is the and he writes in Tehillim, Hashem, I wish that I could sit in the study hall all day long. But instead he says in the Talmud, King David says, I spent my life helping people. I spent my life when the ladies would come after childbirth and they would ask me, am I pure, am I impure, can I be with my husband, can I not? He said, ben din ledin, ben dam ledam. He said, my hands were always dirty with blood, with other people's problems. I was busy with them because that was the greatest position. King David said, I'm the king of Israel. But I'm not going to sit on my throne and pretend I'm some high scholar. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm the greatest leader of the world. Instead, my job is to get my hands dirty, to get involved in the nitty-gritty details of human life. And essentially, when I see a rabbi, and what is the real definition of a rabbi? It's somebody, not somebody who sits on a high throne. And when I went to visit Rabbi Peretz with my wife about 1.5 years ago, Our parents told us, he said, I'm jealous of you. You know what it's like to hear that from other parents? Like, you're jealous of me. It's the other way around. Our parents said, I don't have in all my life of learning the merit to sit in a community and learn Torah with people. I never had that merit. So I sat as the rabbi in a yeshiva, I'm the rabbi in a rabbinic court, I author books, but I never had the privilege to get my hands dirty with the real world. And he asked us that if I could live a little bit through you. And that was an incredible thing for me. It was a perspective shift. It wasn't Baltimore. This was Jerusalem. And my request, we're going to go through this list next week. But in light of what you studied today, take this list home again. Look in your email. Marlene emailed it out to everybody in this room.
Yes.
Look inside. Edit around. Now that you've known some of what we've talked about, I think some of the things on your list are going to change. And I think some of the things on your list are going to be added. And I think we're going to have to redefine. So what is a rabbi? So next week we can continue this discussion.
We should hold off on the women's ordination.
No, we didn't get to the male ordination yet. What do you want women's ordination?